Welcome to OOTO TV, the Out of the Office investigation from our past into the future of personal health and psychophysiological actualization. This time we're discussing structured water, psychophysiology, the human body. We're going to be addressing a foundational concept that really challenges traditional human physiology, the role of water's inherent structure, not just its chemical formula, in our health.
It's a huge topic, Bestor. We're looking at the biophysical and psychophysiological impact of what people call structured water or exclusion zone water. Some even call it the fourth phase of water. It forces us to confront some very long-held assumptions about how water actually behaves inside a living cell.
Precisely. And that brings us to our central question for today. Does the accumulating evidence for structured water, and we're talking about clinical trials, advanced spectroscopy, does it mandate a complete paradigm shift in how we understand cellular biology? And more importantly, how can structured water, psychophysiology, the human body, affect our mental and physical health? I'll be arguing that the impact is systemic and profound.
And Bishop here will be urging some caution. I'll be analyzing the methodological limitations of the existing research. I think we need to be very careful before we jump to any premature conclusions about clinical efficacy, no matter how exciting the idea is.
Well then, let me start by championing why this paradigm shift is not only exciting, but necessary. The whole concept of water just being this, unstructured bulk fluid inside our bodies is fundamentally incomplete. Structured water, which has this hexagonal liquid crystalline configuration, theorized as H3O2, it's essential for life processes, and we can now see it demonstrably improves physiological markers.
I understand the theoretical appeal, Pastor, I really do, but we have to be so careful to differentiate a beautiful theory from clinically validated efficacy that works across, all different kinds of people.
But Béchamp, the evidence of efficacy even from pilot studies, is compelling. Just look at the 2019 work by Kordkov and his colleagues. It's striking. They found that just consuming structured water for a single month significantly impacted measurable health markers. For instance, participants showed a significant reduction in total body weight.
Right, and that was driven by fat mass, correct? A reduction in fat mass is definitely noteworthy.
Exactly, a reduction in fat mass, and it goes beyond just metabolism. There was a truly remarkable improvement in kidney function. They saw a significant decrease in creatinine levels. That's a key waste product. And at the same time, an increase in the glomerular filtration rate. These are objective biochemical markers. They point to a deep functional enhancement.
I will concede those findings are highly suggestive of some genuine biological activity, no question.
It's more than suggestive. These changes, they reflect an overall reduction of endogenous intoxication of the body. They point toward these profound systemic benefits. It shows that structured water, psychophysiology of the human body, can be linked to preventing illness and increasing longevity. It does this by enhancing the body's adaptive capacity. And that's why I say exposure to structured water, psychophysiology of the human body, is critical to our mitochondrial and cellular functioning. You see, structured water, psychophysiology of the human body, creates a healthy environment for cellular growth and success.
That's a very powerful and, I'd say, optimistic assessment, Pester. But this is where we have to pump the brakes a little and introduce that methodological caution. While these sophisticated techniques like Raman microspectroscopy, they do confirm that there's some localized, non-bulk-like water near biomolecules, the leap from that to widespread clinical efficacy, well, it requires much larger, more decisive studies.
But discovering the mechanism is the first step. We should be celebrating that, even if the research is still young.
Of course, but we have to focus on the context of that mechanism. That foundational psychophysiological study you keep citing, while it's interesting, the authors themselves explicitly state its primary limitation. The sample size, n equals 30, is just too small to draw any decisive general conclusions, especially when you're including people of different ages, sexes, professions. It's too varied for such a small group.
The physics of the cell is still consistent across those individuals, though.
You're listening to OOTO TV with research by author Paul Bulow.
And I still believe the physics remains the key.
But the structural confinement is still a major issue, Pesto. Advanced spectroscopy indicates that this population of non-bulk-like water, it's a small, consistent portion. We're talking only about 3% of the total water inside a cell. So if 97% of the water is still this bulk-like fluid, it suggests that the claims of a complete physiological revolution might be, well, a bit overstated relative to the actual volume we're dealing with. So the core challenge, the real question is this. Can structured water, psychophysiology, the human body, truly improve our human health across diverse populations, or are we just seeing some transient effects in a very small, specific pilot group?
I think that brings us perfectly to the foundational theory. The benefits we're seeing aren't random. They are rooted in the physics of what's called EZ water, the exclusion zone. Gerald Pollack's work is seminal here. It demonstrates that the water right next to hydrophilic surfaces forms this negatively charged zone. It literally excludes solutes, and this highly ordered hexagonal structure, the H3O2 lattice, it acts like a fundamental biological battery.
Okay, the idea of EZ water as a biological battery, one that's charged by radiant energy like sunlight or infrared, it's a fascinating concept, I'll give you that. But what does that really mean practically for how fluids move in the body?
It means everything. It suggests our physiological textbooks are wrong, or at least incomplete. Specifically, the parts that rely solely on membrane pumps and channels to explain everything. This highly ordered phase separation dictates that the differences in the water's solvent capacity, driven by this EZ battery, are what fundamentally influence molecular distribution. It's not just about pumps.
Okay, I see the argument. And yes, the existence of this biointerfacial water is confirmed. We know it's there, about 2.6 angstroms thick around macromolecules. But Pasteur, we cannot just forget the highly specific, well-established regulatory mechanisms the body already has for fluid dynamics. We have these incredibly sophisticated systems.
Such as?
Well, for example, we'd have osmosensing regions in the brain, like the OVLT, that detect tiny changes in blood salt levels. We have ion channels like TRV1 that regulate cellular fluid. And, crucially, we have massive hormonal systems like vasopressin and the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, or RAS. These mediate fluid homeostasis, especially when the body is under stress. We can't just dismiss decades of established science based on a structural finding that, by modern measurement, accounts for such a tiny percentage of intracellular water.
But Béchamp, if this structural integrity is so critical for cellular success, then we have to ask, what are key elements for structured water, psychophysiology of the human body? The principles are actually very clear, and they come from nature. We're talking about cyclical spiral movement, vortexing. We're talking exposure to natural energy like sunlight and infrared light and natural electromagnetic fields, even the one from our own heart. These are the forces that create and maintain this coherence.
I understand the focus on natural methods, but let's challenge a core assumption here based on the study itself. The question of structured water versus just adequate hydration. The researchers themselves noted that improvements in water salt metabolism, this was an increase in hemoglobin concentration in red blood cells that occurred in both groups, the structured water group and the control group. It happened just from them drinking water regularly.
That is a fair point, Béchamp, regarding general hydration. I'll concede that. However, the unique benefits, the detoxification, the fat loss, the incredible kidney optimization, those were only seen in the structured water group. Furthermore, proponents argue that modern water processing is actually part of the problem. The principles of structured water, psychophysiology of the human body, suggest that drinking purified water through osmosis and desalination may not be good for health, because those processes strip the water of its necessary coherence and energy. You're left with a depleted, unstructured product.
Now that is a huge claim. To say our standard clean water sources are detrimental, that requires massive independent validation. It connects a structural property to a population-wide health problem. I think we need to stay focused on the evidence we do have, particularly around adaptive capacity, where the psychophysiological claims are strongest.
Absolutely. Let's look at the autonomic nervous system, the ANS, because the evidence here is direct and it speaks powerfully to both mental and physical health. The experimental group, they showed significant positive changes in heart rate variability, or HRV. This is a crucial window into the balance between our fight or flight and our rest and digest systems.
And what were those specific changes?
I'm glad you asked. The data showed a clear increase in parasympathetic activity. The RMSSD, which measures short-term recovery, was up 19%. High-frequency power up 26%. And at the same time, sympathetic regulation went down. The LFHF ratio dropped by 18%. These are robust indices, Bishamp. They confirm a real growth of adaptive potential and improved recovery. That translates directly to better health.
Those are impressive numbers. I agree. They do indicate a shift toward rest and repair. However, we cannot ignore the contextual dynamics. The control group, the ones drinking regular water, showed a, quote, reliable negative dynamics in almost all their HRV indicators. Their sympathetic activity went up, their reserves went down.
And why is that a point against structured water? It sounds like a point for it.
Because the authors themselves attributed the control group's decline to the unfavorable seasonal, climatic, and epidemiological period during the experiment. This interpretation is vital. It suggests that the structured water might be acting primarily as a protective buffer against environmental stress. It didn't so much create a superstate as it prevented the seasonal decline seen in the controls. That's valuable, sure, but it's different from a radical therapeutic intervention.
Whether it protects against decline or actively improves function, Basham, the outcome is positive health optimization. And this points to the deeper information aspect. The very structure of water allows it to store and carry information. Research into how water responds to sound, to the environment. It all suggests coherent water interacts with our consciousness.
The memory of water concept. Look, Pastor, it's fascinating, but it introduces a layer of conjecture that is incredibly difficult to validate with rigorous, standardized, double-blind protocols. It's just not there yet.
But it means the psychophysiological benefits go way beyond simple biochemistry. It's about the energetic state of the body. Our tissues, our proteins, our DNA, they have a liquid crystalline nature, which makes them highly sensitive to this coherent matrix. This isn't philosophy. It's consistent with quantum electrodynamics.
I accept the liquid crystalline nature of tissues. I accept the importance of interfacial water. But in a rigorous debate, we have to stay focused on the measurable, hard data, the statistically significant reduction in fat mass, the improvement in kidney filtration. These results demand confirmation in larger, double-blind trials before we can move this from a compelling pilot phenomenon to a clinically accepted mechanism for preventing chronic illness. Until then, the claims are intellectually stimulating, but they remain preliminary.
I still maintain my position. The convergence of the biophysics, the easy water layer, the H3O2 formation, with the human trials confirming these renal and ANS improvements, it all suggests structured water is a crucial missing link in physiology. It's fundamental to hydration, detoxification, and our adaptive capacity. The evidence strongly supports a deep investigation into how we can use natural sources, vortexing, sunlight, to optimize this for our health.
Well, Pastor, what we've established today is that structured or biointerfacial water certainly exists in our cells and is likely involved in homeostasis. However, its small proportion combined with the pilot nature of these human studies, it just demands methodological humility. The next step has to be robust validation across diverse populations before we go rewriting textbooks or adopting broad health recommendations. The question is still one of scale and replication.
But Béchamp, the potential here for structured water, psychophysiology in the human body, is just too massive to ignore because an initial study was small. The data points to a systemic, energy-based matrix that supports recovery and vitality.
I will concede this much. The structure of water inside the human body is clearly far more complex than we previously understood. And that complexity demands we consider multiple perspectives, from quantum electrodynamics right through to clinical organ function, to fully appreciate this vital matrix of life.
The debate and, more importantly, the essential research must absolutely continue. We have to bridge that gap between the physics and the clinical application.